That is the actual chief of police.
Officer Jennings, you racially profiled me. Secure Jennings' activated body camera footage immediately. Summon the watch commander immediately. You will not speak further.
Yes, Chief.
It was precisely 7:45 a.m., and the air still held the cool crispness of the late autumn morning. The restricted lot was quiet, usually reserved only for senior staff and command-level utility vehicles. Chief Evelyn Hayes was already moving with deliberate, practiced efficiency. She was 3 weeks into her tenure as the Phoenix Southwest Precinct Chief, a historic and highly scrutinized appointment. She wore plain clothes beneath a department-issued tactical vest, transferring heavy-duty bags and specialized gear into the back of a large, unmarked, department-owned utility vehicle. The vehicle itself was key. It was a high-end black government-issued Tahoe, distinguishable instantly by the secured license plates and the subtle, nearly invisible department markings on the rear window. Accessing this specific section required a key card. No random civilian could ever wander in. Every detail screamed official business. Then the silence was violently fractured. The sound of heavy boots striking the concrete announced an intruder to the peaceful loading process. A voice followed, sharp and overly aggressive, cutting through the morning stillness like a knife. The voice demanded an immediate halt to her actions. This was Officer Kyle Jennings. He was young, just 25, and assigned to the vehicle management detail that morning, a duty that involved policing the lots and ensuring vehicle integrity. He was brimming with misplaced authority and confidence. He approached the chief rapidly, his hand already resting heavily on his service belt, a posture indicating immediate threat assessment. He was about to make the single most expensive mistake of his entire professional life. Jennings' tone was accusatory, his focus fixed solely on the person next to the expensive vehicle, ignoring the established context entirely. He was already convinced of wrongdoing. He barked the restriction clearly. This section was strictly for command staff. The implication, left hanging rawly in the air, was clear. She did not belong.
Chief Hayes paused her work instantly, her movements professional and utterly composed. She straightened slowly, presenting a figure of quiet, unshakable authority. She looked directly at the approaching young officer, her gaze level and assessing. She offered a simple, factual explanation. She worked there. She was merely loading her required operational gear. Jennings did not slow his pace. He ignored her statement completely. His eyes slid past the official signage and the high-end government plates. His internal narrative had already been cemented. He stepped even closer, violating standard professional distance. His body language was aggressive, dominating the space. He declared, without any ambiguity, that he did not know her. The young officer's next words solidified his motivation for the security cameras recording the entire encounter. He stated plainly that people like her simply did not drive government cars of this caliber. This statement was the inflection point, moving the confrontation instantly from a security check to an issue of targeted prejudice. Hayes, without flinching, reached inside her vest pocket and produced the requested identification. It was not subtle or questionable. She displayed her official credentials, a heavy, gold chief's badge affixed to a secure clip alongside her department photo ID card, clearly labeling her as the precinct chief. The documentation was pristine and irrefutable. Jennings saw the identification clearly. He had to, yet his visceral, internal rejection of her presence overrode all objective evidence. He scoffed loudly, the sound exaggerated, performed for the benefit of the security cameras and his own internal satisfaction. He dismissed the official identification out of hand. His mind had already made the ruling, and nothing the woman presented would ever change it.
Jennings's aggressive disbelief morphed into a furious, defensive arrogance. He laughed, a high, mocking sound that echoed slightly off the surrounding concrete walls. He loudly declared the gold badge looked like cheap fabrication, something that could be easily printed off a home computer or purchased online. The official ID was dismissed as counterfeit evidence. Hayes maintained her measured silence. She had now moved past simple compliance and was entering the procedural assessment phase. She urged Jennings to follow standard protocol. She told him explicitly to use his activated police radio to verify her identity through dispatch. A quick 2-second check would resolve the entire situation peacefully and professionally. Jennings refused to shift his attention from his initial prejudice assumption. He remained fixated on seizing the vehicle, convinced it was stolen or illegally obtained. The thought of admitting error, of following the direction of the woman he'd already judged, was unbearable to his ego. He took a heavy, dramatic stance, confirming the seizure of the government asset. Reluctantly, primarily to satisfy the procedural requirements he knew the security footage would later demand, Jennings finally called dispatch. He refused to verify the chief's face or name. Instead, he simply read the license plate numbers off the Tahoe, requesting a registration check on the restricted vehicle. He hoped, perhaps desperately, that the plates would come back as invalid, justifying his ongoing aggressive behavior. The confirmation call provided zero ambiguity. The response from the dispatcher was calm, immediate, and utterly damning to Jennings' rapidly collapsing position. The vehicle was registered unequivocally to the Southwest Command Chief. The next decision Jennings made sealed his fate, transforming a mere confrontation into a federal civil rights violation.
The dispatcher confirmed the specific name associated with the vehicle registration, stating clearly that the registered owner was Chief Evelyn Hayes. The confirmation was precise, professional, and entirely accurate. The information was broadcast clearly over Jennings's shoulder radio, echoing for anyone in the immediate vicinity and the secure command room to hear. The weight of the objective evidence now crushed his initial assumption. Jennings was left with only two choices: retreat professionally and apologize, or double down with escalating, baseless aggression. Jennings chose the latter path instantly. His face flushed a dark red, visible even in the dim morning light. He felt furious, cornered, and overwhelmingly defensive. His fear of being wrong instantly metabolized into a rigid, hostile certainty. He loudly, almost frantically, declared the confirmation received from dispatch must be erroneous or part of a deeper fabrication. The credentials were still counterfeit, he insisted, the plate registration a clerical error. His refusal to accept the confirmation demonstrated a complete breakdown of professional conduct. His prejudice was now actively overriding direct, recorded departmental evidence. He stood his ground, ignoring the chief's silent command presence. He immediately requested that dispatch send a tow detail to the command lot, demanding the unauthorized seizure of the department vehicle be completed immediately. He did not realize that a secondary witness, monitoring the escalating tension and the frantic, unprofessional radio traffic, was already rushing toward his location. Officer Nora Cruz, stationed across the complex, recognized the unusual registration query and the strained voice of the officer demanding a tow. She knew the consequences of seizing a command asset. She sprinted toward the restricted lot, hoping to intervene before the situation became irreparable.
Officer Nora Cruz arrived on the scene in a burst of motion, skidding slightly to a halt on the concrete. She had heard the last frantic request for the tow detail, recognizing the severity of Jennings' mistake. Her internal alarm system was ringing violently. She saw Jennings standing in rigid confrontation with the woman next to the high-end Tahoe. Cruz instantly recognized the figure. Her face went pale, the blood draining away as the full implications of the confrontation struck her. The woman Jennings was attempting to arrest was immediately identifiable to anyone who had attended the recent mandatory command briefings. Cruz understood, in one terrifying moment, that Jennings was not confronting a civilian, but the apex of the entire precinct's hierarchy. Cruz shouted the warning instantly, breaking standard protocol in her immediate panic. She used the chief's title, confirming the identity that Jennings had so belligerently rejected for the past 5 minutes. The actual chief of police was standing right in front of him. Jennings' rigid posture dissolved instantly. The aggressive certainty evaporated, replaced by the ghastly realization of his irreversible error. He saw the genuine terror etched across Officer Cruz's face. He finally registered the high-end utility vehicle, the restricted lot, and the gold badge he had mocked. The shock was immediate, paralyzing, and absolute. The internal collapse of his self-assured arrogance was sickeningly palpable. He stammered, attempting to formulate a frantic, desperate apology, a quick verbal retreat that might possibly mitigate the damage. He opened his mouth, prepared to throw himself on the mercy of the woman whose authority he had just spent 6 minutes publicly dismantling. But the time for apologies, for explanations, or for pleas had vanished, the moment the chief straightened her spine.
Chief Hayes moved with the sudden, quiet certainty of a predator. She allowed Jennings no opportunity for speech, no chance to craft a defense, not even the briefest moment for a retraction. Her voice cut him off mid-syllable. It was no longer the calm, professional tone of a woman loading her car. It was measured, absolute authority, filling the entire restricted lot. The words she delivered were precise, structured as a rapid recitation of institutional violations. She stated clearly that he had engaged in racial profiling. She listed the ignored evidence, the department credentials, the dismissive attitude toward dispatch confirmation, and the unauthorized attempt to seize a critical command asset. He was done speaking. The confrontation was over. The chief's demeanor shifted entirely to the immediate management of evidence and command accountability. She immediately issued a crisp, non-negotiable directive to Officer Cruz. Cruz was instructed to secure Jennings' activated body camera footage instantly. This was the critical evidence. Next, she was ordered to secure the entire lot surveillance feed. Finally, the watch commander was to be summoned immediately to the location. Jennings stood frozen, paralyzed by the weight of the realization and the clinical termination of his career. Commander Davison, the on-duty watch commander, arrived minutes later, stepping into a scene of absolute silent professionalism overseen by the new chief and a young, trembling officer who understood he had witnessed a firing. Davison was quickly briefed, his face tightening with grim understanding as the implications of profiling the department's own commander became horrifyingly clear. The internal review process moved with unprecedented speed. The city knew the severity of the institutional injury.
The video evidence was utterly indefensible. Officer Jennings' behavior, captured from multiple angles, including his own body camera, demonstrated a malicious, sustained refusal to acknowledge departmental authority based purely on prejudiced assumption. The footage showed him scoffing at a gold badge, mocking department registration, and actively ignoring live dispatch confirmation. There was no ambiguity. 3 weeks after the incident, Officer Jennings was officially terminated for gross misconduct. The disciplinary panel found his actions fundamentally undermined public trust and constituted a severe misuse of police authority. The termination was followed by the immediate stripping of his state law enforcement certification, permanently barring him from practicing as a sworn officer in the region. However, the consequences had only just begun for the city. Chief Hayes, recognizing the systemic nature of the bias Jennings' actions had revealed, moved immediately to the civil courts. She filed a substantial civil rights lawsuit against the city of Phoenix, alleging institutional prejudice, hostile work environment, and emotional distress caused by the targeted profiling. The city faced an impossible legal position. Defending an officer who racially profiled his own commanding chief on restricted department grounds, using recorded department assets, was a losing battle that would be disastrous in front of a jury. The evidence was absolute and the optics were catastrophic. The city attorney's office moved quickly to mitigate the financial damage and public relations fallout. They settled the suit almost immediately, conceding the institutional failure without attempting a costly, futile defense. The final agreed-upon cost was staggering: a $4.5 million payout to Chief Evelyn Hayes to compensate for the damages. Furthermore, the settlement mandated sweeping, compulsory anti-profiling and bias training implemented across the entire precinct, addressing the deep-seated systemic issues that Jennings' arrogance had so clearly exposed. The incident and the resulting payout became a permanent, expensive lesson in accountability and the profound danger of allowing prejudice to supersede professional conduct. The ultimate moral of this story is that authority requires integrity, and that institutional bias, when aggressively acted upon, will inevitably carry a devastating financial and moral cost. When evidence and procedure conflict with personal prejudice, the job is not to ignore the facts, but to check the bias. Do you think justice was truly served in this case, or should the consequences have extended further than just the officer and the financial settlement? Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment for more intriguing videos.